and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us once again right here on another edition of The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. And we've been having a real treat this month because we have been having Dr. Zamprone, who's available from his professorship duties for the summer, to actually be our host right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. And today we're so happy to be here together. So this is Ellen Kamai, the Natural Nurse,
and this is Dr. Z, Dr. Eugene Zamprone. Great to be here, Ellen, and we're in our natural alternatives form from our old days. It's great to hear you.
It is. It's fun, and I really enjoyed that play shop that we just did. We just did a play shop at Restoration Farm, which is in Old Bethpage, New York, where we spent the day going outside and gathering wild, edible, and medicinal plants and making them into food and medicine. And up and coming, we have a wonderful on-ground event that people can join us. So it's time to start talking about our Chinatown trip, which is something people actually can come to New York City. And you know, Dr. Z, I think this might be the 37th year that we actually have been offering this trip.
Wow, that's amazing.
It surprises even him. Let's remember, you didn't even have children at the time, and they were already grown adults living on their own, Dr. Z.
Yes.
So it's been many decades that we have been offering all of our natural alternative books, workshops, webinars. I have a webinar coming up this week on botanicals for pain and inflammation that actually offers CE accreditation for holistic practitioners and conventional practitioners, including nurses, midwives, acupuncturists, massage therapists, and naturopathic physicians also get certificates on many of the certification courses that we give. So just go to naturalnurse.com events, and you can sign up for any of these on ground, such as the upcoming Chinatown trip, which is in September, or online, which happens almost every day. So join us. We love to have you. We had a great turnout for our herb workshop. Fun shop. Dr. Z likes to call it a fun shop. How come you like that word fun shop so much, Dr. Z?
I heard it somewhere, I don't know, many years ago, and kind of brought it into my own vocabulary. It's because when you and I are teaching herbs, it's like we enter into an altered state of consciousness in a way, and it feels like we're not even working. We're just enjoying and transmuting the information from Shen Nong and some of the ancients and all our teachers, or shamanic teachers and other teachers too, like Dr. Mitchell from Bastyr, and people that have shaped and molded us. And it's just great. We get into this kind of space where we get so excited about what we're teaching and bringing to people so that they can learn about herbs, so that they can take care of themselves, because this is how the knowledge is transmitted from one generation to another.
This is true. And so often, I'm sure this happens to you also, people tell me, oh, you are really a pioneer in the natural medical field. And I say, no, not at all. I'm just an extension of an actually long and unbroken lineage of people deeply versed in natural medicine. It's never not been around, although it seems like the political powers that be, like we discuss in our book, The Natural Medicine Chest, significantly and repeatedly rears its ugly head and tries to clamp down on proliferation of this knowledge, which I actually think is a human birthright to natural medicine.
When I teach history at the University of Bridgeport, when I teach history of medicine, we go back to ancient times and look at, from what exists there, knowledge that's probably started with, we at least can go back to the written record with the Emperor Shen Nong, and of course also the Yellow Emperor, and then from Egyptian papyri and Mesopotamian cuneiform, and even earlier forms of writing from Iran and Babylon. And then we move into, of course, cultures a little later, the Mayans, and all of them used herbs. There's pictures of herbs on their writings. Of course, you can't forget Ayurveda, too. All of this knowledge has been tried to be systematically eliminated, and there's proof of all these things. But for some reason, it has not been able to been stamped out. And so we're kind of keepers of this knowledge. We're just the modern day keepers of the knowledge, transmitting this. And I know Dr. Bastyr said a famous quote. Dr. Bastyr, of course, is the namesake of Bastyr University, Natural Health Sciences, where I went to naturopathic school and college. And he said that this medicine will always survive because it gets people well when there's no hope. And you can't extinguish that. It's like trying to extinguish the dandelion, Dr. Katmai, which I have a shirt that says, "When did dandelions become our enemies?" It's an anti-pesticide shirt that I wear proudly to our fun shops. But it's that type of idea. It's like people have tried to kill weeds, but they keep coming back because they have a purpose, a reason, a power that is beyond us.
That is so true. And also, we do not say not to use modern therapies. They are fantastic and life-saving when used appropriately. But it seems that so much of the medical model and standard of practice seems to eliminate really highly scientific, evidence-based therapeutic value of natural remedies. And that's what we're going to talk about today, in particular for autoimmune disease. And actually, my goal is to get that included as standard of practice and then maintain the more medically invasive and much more dangerous, although sometimes necessary, conventional therapeutics, because it seems like so much of the standard of practice is actually more based on maximizing pharmaceutical sales rather than maximizing healing effects for an individual.
Well, it's very deep-seated. There was a schism in medicine. Of course, it goes back many thousands of years, from even Galen, who wanted people to learn his system of medicine and actually put to death people that he found forming rival schools and things like that. And he was, of course, the emperor to Marcus Aurelius. The physician to Emperor Marcus Aurelius. So it goes back then, and then other great schisms in medicine, but certainly the big schism was the post-World War II schism of medicine, where allopathic medicine became the more dominant type of medicine and actually offered olive branches to the other types of MDs. There were 5 types of MDs at that time. We're talking at the turn of the last century, the early 1900s. You had the hydropaths, who were run by Russell Troll, who had a college in New Jersey, the Hydropathic Institute, Hydrotherapeutic Institute in New Jersey, right at the Delaware River, where MDs were trained to use non-invasive techniques. Of course, hydrotherapy was the big technique brought over by Germany from, this was even before Father Kneipp brought it over and Luce brought it over. Then you had, of course, the eclectic doctors, and one of my students did a fabulous presentation on eclectic medicine. I'll have to send it to you one day. She actually is from Ohio, and she went to the bastion of eclecticism. Eclectic doctors were, again, medical doctors who used, before we had synthetic drugs, that's what they used. They became experts in echinacea way before our grandparents were born. Hydrastis, golden seal, and wrote about it and wrote extensive case-based knowledge since when did the double-blind placebo-controlled trial become the main way to learn medicine? It was always transmitted through case-based learning, because when you present a case with your evidence base and lab work changes and things like that, which we're going to talk about today, because in one of the herbs that I want to talk about, one of the doctors from Canada did that and was able to prove and bring down antibodies. But the point I'm trying to make is that the eclectics wrote all about those types of things. And then there were the physiomedicalist doctors, and then you had the homeopathic doctors, and there were a couple other branches. And then, of course, the allopathic doctors, who at the time were using mercury and calomel and leeching people and things like that. And then eventually they offered an olive branch, and all those branches of MDs joined the AMA, and eventually they were all systematically destroyed. Almost like, I always tease my students, that those that are Star Trek fans, it was like the Borg taking, I don't know if you know.
I do.
You're a fan of those? Of course you are. But, the Borg would assimilate and destroy civilization, sort of. Anyway, so that's what happened. And then there was like one type of medicine, and other types of medicine had to go underground. Naturopathy, chiropractic. The osteopathics, they also lost their soul in a way, too, by embracing and losing a lot of their philosophy. Of course, some of it's come back now. So anyway, that's kind of where we stand today, and hopefully, we're kind of at the vanguard of teaching people about natural medicine, and we'll pass it on to the next generation. I've certainly done my share helping to start a naturopathic school, and probably training over 500 naturopathic physicians who know me as their professor and main herbal influence teaching herbal medicine, and of course you too. So, I'm excited, and I think teaching is the way. Radio is a way of teaching. Our books are a way of teaching. Lecturing is a way of teaching. It all revolves around teaching if you think about it.
And we're going to do some of that right here as we speak, right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. And thank you so much for joining us today. We're here at Progressive Radio Network, one of our favorite places to offer you shows. And you can visit the archives anytime if there's something you hear that you like. We actually have, Dr. Z, hundreds of shows on the archives, many hundreds. And Dr. Z, we have over 300,000 listeners who regularly download the shows. So, that's very, very exciting to be part of Progressive Radio Network. So let's go into our topic for today, Dr. Z. We thought we would focus on something because here is a place where conventional medicine has some drug therapies, but unfortunately, they really wreak havoc on the system, although they may be helpful, may be useful at times. But also, it's really a difficult topic for conventional medicine. For one reason, there's no immediate and identifiable cause. It's a complex situation. And this is called autoimmune disease. So give us your simple definition, Dr. Z, if you would, of autoimmune disease.
Well, like you said, they're very complex, multifactorial conditions, but I think what we could say that brings them together is they arise from the loss of self-tolerance by the body and an infiltration of inflammatory cells that target a particular tissue or system of the body, and the body loses, again, the innate and adaptive immune response and starts to see self as non-self and begins to attack it, almost like kind of how you are allergic to, weed or peanuts or whatever the allergy is. You become allergic to your own self, and that's not supposed to happen. That something's breaking down, something is unbalanced when that happens. And we've done extensive research and looked at a lot of the factors that drive the pathogenesis and the causes, a whole plethora of causes of autoimmune disease, which have to be identified and balanced and eliminated, and that's kind of the role of the modern-day naturopathic physician or holistic nurse, is to kind of help identify many of these causes, and then hopefully that'll bring balance to the system. Causes that involve so many different things, including adrenal and endocrine dysregulation, gut dysbiosis, molecular mimicry, lack of many nutrients in the body, stealth pathogens. There's many causes of these things, and but thank God there's a lot of herbs that we'll talk about that have brought balance to the immune system and have a myriad of other applications. And I want to focus
on 3 herbs. Right, and some of the newest research is exciting. But although it seems, and in your professional opinion, would you say that the incidence is actually increasing? Because we gave a lecture on this, and we talked about the fact that even Otzi the mummy, which is called the Iceman, one of the oldest mummies ever found about humans, seemed to have an autoimmune condition as well. So it's not new.
Yeah, I think these diseases have been around a long time. Arthritis, for instance, George Washington cured a guy of what they called arthritis. Back in the old days, they used to call these diseases just gout, or gouty diathesis, which really was a broad term, meaning anything that afflicted the joints. It really wasn't the more modern definition of gout, where you build up uric acid in the joints and cause inflammation and things like that. Until eventually different researchers began to realize that these autoimmune diseases are systemic. They just don't affect the joints. So they're not all arthritis, but they affect other things. They can, for instance, like lupus can affect the kidneys. Sarcoidosis can affect the lungs and the heart. Arthritis, of course, can really affect even the cardiovascular system. So, we think, rheumatoid arthritis type of thing. So these become systemic, but they've been around a really long time, I'm sure. And naturopaths have looked at how these things were treated using herbs, using fasting, using natural therapies, using probiotics before they became a big buzzword, to kind of bring balance to the immune system. And these are, and of course, the mushrooms, too, were really big, because I want to talk a little bit about the mushroom cordyceps, because that's a big one that I think has a lot of other actions, but also good actions on autoimmune disease. So, yeah, these have been around a long time. We know that because we go back in the Chinese texts and some of the ancient Ayurvedic texts, and they looked at it, and they called it, for instance, in Ayurveda, they call these autoimmune disease ama vata, which is the buildup of ama, which is a toxin that comes from incomplete digestion of foods, that builds up in the body, that gets through the gut. I mean, they were talking about leaky gut. Now it's a buzzword. Yeah, there's even medical conferences where the medical doctors say, "Oh yeah, we discovered this new thing, leaky gut."
Right. Well,
nothing's new under the sun.
I want to comment on that evolution of vocabulary. If anyone gets a copy of our book, and I actually suggest that everyone may want to do that, which is called Arthritis, the Alternative Medicine Definitive Guide, where we discuss a lot of what we will be covering today and how people can use some naturopathic therapies such as juicing and fasting and herbs and diet to really slow down that entire inflammatory response, which leads to arthritis and all autoimmune illnesses that we will be covering today. But your discussion about the changing vocabulary is really interesting because while, like you said, leaky gut is now being used as a term, really, if you say intestinal permeability, that are the words that were always used by medicine, but leaky gut is a newer buzzword. Another big one is something called microbiome. We discuss microbiome in depth, which is the commensal organisms that live in our body, adding to and creating such things as autoimmune responses, but we just don't use that term microbiome. We might use, a term such as the microorganisms that are there, and we might be talking about probiotics, but now the new buzzword is microbiome. So although these concepts are old, sometimes the language comes up with a new buzzword.
Yeah, I love buzzwords. They're great, but, you got to remember that this has been around a long time, and we're just taking older information and repackaging it, which is fine as long as people get the idea. I think it's great to hear people talk about leaky gut. If you polled everyone on the street, do you know what leaky gut is? I'd say maybe 20-30% would know what the heck that was, and that's amazing.
That is true. That is true. That is becoming big. Well, we want to take a little break right here on Natural Alternatives. So, Engineer, will go for a break right here on Natural Alternatives, and then we can play the Natural Medicine Chest. And when we come back, let's go deeply into some of the herbs that we are talking about because it's an important concept, and also people can learn how to get some really new things such as T-cell balance. That's a good word to write down, T-cell balance, how you learn to balance your T-cells and special formulas that might be useful for T-cell balance. So we will be right back right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z.
Of the Natural Medicine Chest, we'll discuss jojoba, the miracle plant of the desert.
Jojoba is spelled Jojoba, but is pronounced according to its Spanish origins. The jojoba plant grows in the American Southwest and the Sonoran Desert in Mexico. The jojoba is a large bush-like plant resembling mistletoe. It can reach a height of 15 feet and can live from 100 to 200 years. The Sonoran Indians have used the oil pressed from the jojoba beans for centuries. Father Juniper Serra, founder of 21 missions in California, noted in the early 1700s that the local Indians were using jojoba oil for treating sores, cuts, bruises, burns, and as a diet supplement, to soothe skin from sun and wind burns, as a cooking oil, and even as a beverage.
The importance of jojoba as a cash crop was proclaimed in 1935. But it was not until 1974, when the killing of sperm whales was banned, that the government began to study jojoba oil in depth as a substitute for whale oil. The National Academy of Sciences concluded jojoba oil has a radically different chemical structure than any other known oil. Most oils break down or turn rancid. Jojoba, on the other hand, is hypoallergenic, non-toxic, never turns rancid, and does not break down even under high temperature and pressure.
The University of California at Riverside did a study where they cooked 27 batches of popcorn in the same heated jojoba oil. The last batch was just as perfect as the first. These unusual properties are unique to jojoba oil because, chemically speaking, jojoba oil is not really an oil at all, but is a liquid wax. Its composition is almost identical to sebum, which is the oil secreted by human sebaceous glands to help to protect the skin from the environment.
Jojoba has a myriad of usages. The cosmetic industry takes advantage of its compatibility to human skin by adding it to shampoos, conditioners, moisturizers, and many other cosmetic products. In medicine, jojoba can be used directly on rashes, cuts, and psoriasis. It may also be used as a lubricant for artificial hearts. Jojoba contains a natural appetite suppressant, which can be used in weight loss products. It has no known side effects. In industry, jojoba is known to be a superior engine lubricant and will cause a car to run 20 to 30 degrees cooler when added to the crankcase oil.
So, if you are interested in a miracle plant from the desert, reach for jojoba in your natural medicine chest.
And welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us today right here on The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. And today we have a special show with myself, Ellen Kamai, the Natural Nurse, along with Dr. Eugene Zamperone. We are the hosts of The Natural Nurse and Dr. Z. You can always send us a message or find our activities at naturalnurse.com, look at calendar, or at drznaturally.com. And Dr. Z, thank you so much for that explanation, talking about autoimmune disease, and we're going to be discussing that more. And we're also going to be talking about T-cell balance. Now, Dr. Z, when we talk about autoimmune disease, just give us a quickie list of what some of those categories might be that people may recognize as an issue for themselves.
Well, you have rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's syndrome and ankylosing spondylitis, polymyalgia rheumatica. In the neurological system, maybe Guillain-Barré or also multiple sclerosis. But the biggest one would be, I think, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. That's one of the biggest things that people have. And, you know, in conventional medicine, they basically just wait until the thyroid poops out, and then you go on thyroid hormone the rest of your life. Now there are, of course, many, many things that you can do to potentially stop the body from attacking the thyroid. You mentioned the rapid emergence of autoimmune disease. There are lots of people, over 50 million Americans have some autoimmune disease, according to this study in the American Journal of Public Health 2000. And women, for some reason, this is interesting, Dr. Kamai, there seems to be a preference for women versus men, which means that somehow estrogen and some of the sexual hormones, the estrogen-androgen balance, seems to be very much implicated in at least somewhat the pathogenesis of autoimmune disease. And it's interesting because some of the herbs that we use for autoimmune disease in the T-cell balance formula, like Rehmannia, which is the first one I want to talk a little bit about, seems to be very effective for balancing the endocrine system in both men and women. Rehmannia is an old, ancient Chinese herb. It's called Shen De Huang and Shu De Huang, or De Huang. And it's one of these kind of a yellowy, sticky herbs. They call it sticky. When you actually eat Rehmannia, we actually taste Rehmannia when we go on our Chinatown walk, and it's actually very sweet and tasty, and people like to chew on it. Has a nice flavor. But it contains these very interesting compounds which are called glycosides. And these glycosides, they actually resemble, if you look at them molecularly, they resemble both adrenal hormones, and they also resemble testosterone and, to a small part, estrogen, but more the testosterone and DHEA and these other hormones, which have all been looked at to be almost like the heralders of autoimmune disease. There's one study that we have in one of our presentations that shows that 10 years before people developed autoimmune disease, they went back and they looked at their blood of some of these patients. And too bad the doctors didn't spot it at the time, But they all found in these studies that their adrenal glands were shot, so to speak. If I could use a Long Island colloquialism, you're shot. And basically, they found low function. And some of the researchers were saying, well, is this a cause or effect? Was it something happened to their adrenals and then they got autoimmune disease, or did they get autoimmune disease and then something happened to their adrenals? Sort of the horse in the cart. But no, they all said that the adrenal glands go down, and then autoimmune disease, there's a big chance that you can get autoimmune disease. Now, we're all under this horrific fight or flight from living in modern society, from being online all the time to being constantly under stress to the war on terror, you name the stressor, not balanced spiritual life, not living within nature and harmony or according to our dosha, like in Ayurvedic medicine. So helping the adrenal glands is paramount, and of course, Romania is one of those fabulous herbs that we can use for that. Any comments on Romania?
Before we go into that, we will go into all of these herbs, in particular with a big focus on three that we wanted to talk about: cordyceps, Romania, and rosemary. Those have so much research. But let us first discuss, if possible, what is T cell? Why are we concerned with T cell?
Well, the T cells, that's a good point. The T cells are part of our immune system that either has cells that attack or message the body to chill out, so to speak, to regulate the immune system. So as of now, we know that there are several classifications of these T cells, which they call, and we're particularly looking at the T helper cells. So there's Th1, T helper 1, Th2, T helper 2, Th3, which they renamed as Treg cells, and now there's a new discovered class, maybe about 10, 15 years ago, Th17, and I'm sure they'll discover more as medicine progresses. Now, these cells are needed for all things. Sometimes we want to rev up the immune system, and sometimes we want to chill it out, so to speak. And so these cells are called in by specific intermolecular messengers, cytokines, kinases, etc., which then tells the T cells, oh, it's time to attack. Okay, let's get the Th1 cells and the Th17 cells. You have cancer. Oh, let's attack. So let's get those guys out. Oh, you have allergies. Let's try to chill out the immune system so we're not so symptomatic. So let's get the T regulation cells and the Th2 cells there. So that's kind of a little explanation of what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring balance to the system.
Yes, so they are, these T cells are normal in the body. They are meant to protect our body, but sometimes they get overstimulated and out of whack. Would you say that's part of what's going on here, and they become dysregulated?
Yeah, and like I said, there's a myriad of reasons why they get dysregulated, from not having enough adrenal hormones to maybe having excess estrogens. They've discovered that. Not enough vitamin D, which is an actual steroid. It's similar to like that herb Romania that we're going to talk about. Excess gut flora, which causes the body to, create havoc. Also, there's some interesting stuff that's out there about, slow viruses and things that have been incorporated into our DNA, and that might look at the propensity of autoimmune disease to sometimes run in families, perhaps too. So we're still investigating reasons for autoimmune disease. There's one of the big ones now is called methylation. It's the big buzzword. Are you methylated? Are you taking your good B vitamins versus the junky B vitamins because you have a genetic need for these B vitamins to protect your DNA? So it gets very complex for the practitioner, but as long as you're going to a practitioner who understands really the causes, to try to look for the causes of the autoimmune disease. In medicine, they don't bother to look for causes. They just use drugs to then silence these T cells or silence one of the messenger molecules that commands the T cells to work, like something that's called tumor necrosis factor. Tumor necrosis factor, a lot of drugs work to block that. But the thing is, you need tumor necrosis factor for other things besides, just say you walk in there with arthritis. Well, what happens if you get exposed to tuberculosis? Or what happens if you develop another infectious diseases? Well, then you don't have the wherewithal to fight. And that's the downside of using a lot of these biological remedies, which are really, honestly, I watch TV sometimes, not a lot, it's a waste of time, but I hear a commercial for a new biologic every day. It is the big, you're involved with a lot of this, looking at different medicines that are being made and things like that. You probably hear the same thing, all these new biologicals for all these different things.
That's so true. And while they can be helpful, and I will say this, very often people do get marked relief and a better quality of life by using them. That is true. But the issue is at what cost? Because even on the commercials, they have this long list. Oh, yeah, you're wandering around with the fairies and you're blowing bubbles and you're all happy. But meanwhile, if you listen to the verbiage, the issues that can come up are not a stomach ache and a rash. We're talking about death, destruction of your heart, destruction of your liver. So while they can give relief, wouldn't it be better to try much safer natural interventions with excellent science behind how well they work first, and then, if need be, perhaps call in the big guns?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here talking about these things.
Exactly. So thank you for describing for us, Dr. Z, what the T cell is and why that's a big part of what we need to focus on when we're trying to balance autoimmune disease. And any conventional physician will know that. It's just they are not great at presenting evidence. I'm not going to say they don't understand, because a lot of them are very brilliant people. They went to medical school. It's not easy. But the whole thought process is very simplistic in terms of the teaching program for them, which is one drug, one bug, or, one condition, one drug, not looking at the differences in the individual who are experiencing the symptoms, which someone like yourself, a naturopathic physician, that's the entire focus of your teaching.
Absolutely. When I'm running all my inflammation panels and things like that, I often send these things because I'm working with rheumatologists and things like that. And I get a group that are like, wow, this is really good. And I get a group that, why are you doing these types of things? So I don't understand why they don't know this type of stuff. We all went to medical school and studied biochemistry. But nonetheless, these herbs do resemble biochemicals. That's probably why they work so well in the human body.
Well, let's talk about these three. Because
Good.
I know that we have so much research, and you even sent me, actually today, some of the latest research. We're talking about from 2017 in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, and some really excellent research on these three herbs, which is Rehmannia, cordyceps, and rosemary. Everyone has rosemary in their garden, so they probably are familiar with that one. These other two might be more obscure. But you let me know, which should we talk about first, Dr. Z?
Well, let's quickly talk about Rehmannia, because I mentioned it a little bit, and then we'll move into the cordyceps and the rosemary.
Fine. So just reminding our listeners that if they come with us on our Chinatown trip, which is coming up September 22nd, or we have it all the time, so if you're listening to this show in the future, join us. You will get to taste and really experience Rehmannia, Dr. Z. That's the one you just said is like a sliced root. I guess it's a root or a rhizome.
Mm-hmm. It's radix. The root we use, yep. And
so tell us about it.
Oh, it's the most beautiful flower. I mean, if this is where a TV show would be better, but if you go to like Google Images and look at Romania, it's the most amazing plant. We bought 2 for the botanical gardens at the University of Bridgeport, which I found, and it's just lovely. It contains these powerful glycosides, which are called geoglutanosides, and a very powerful free radically gobbling substance, which we call catapol, and that stops the oxygen from destroying the joint. So what happens is sometimes, oxygen's both a boon and a bane, and it can help us stay alive, but also that's the way our immune system operates to destroy foreigners, is it creates this oxygen-free radicals, which then, if it destroys a germ, great. If it destroys your joints, not so good. So using this Romania helps bring that into balance against the free radicals. It balances the Th1 to Th2 production. So in rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, the Th1 and the Th17 are activated, and that may be a part of our body's intelligence. It may think, wow, there is a stealth pathogen, a hidden germ that's hiding deep within our tissue, so maybe we should destroy it. But yet this germ evades blood tests and evades the doctor's best efforts. So possibly it's the body's own doing that's trying to do that. But sometimes the body gets faked into thinking that our cells are foreigners and then starts this attack. Well, Romania tells the cells, hey, let's not destroy the tissue. Let's think about this a little bit. And so it has the immunosuppressive action on certain parts of the immune system without turning it off entirely. Some of these drugs, they turn the immune system off pretty much entirely. So that can be, like
and you can
said,
hear that in the commercials. So in other words, that is good in terms of stopping your body attacking itself, but not so good in terms of the fact that then your body is not being efficient at stopping the disease process when it's attacked by a microorganism.
Well, it's interesting. Even if in some people the attack is not a microorganism, it's like a piece of rock. For instance, people with silicosis. These are people that have worked for years and years outside, breathing in sand and dust and cement dust and things like that. And that dust gets into the lungs, and then that can create an autoimmune disease and destroy the lung. Well, believe it or not, there was a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial which looked at Romania in 56 cases, small study, but still interesting, of patients with silicosis, and it was shown to be very effective in helping them so that the body, because in this case, you can't, even though your white blood cells try to go in there to kill the foreigner is not a germ. In this case, it's a piece of rock. It's silicon. So it helps that. It also seems to balance something called complement, which has to do with what Dr. Diadamo and the other guy, Dr. Gundry, who's into lectins. These are things that probably we shouldn't be eating too much of that stimulate the immune system. And so by balancing and stopping the excessive reactions caused by the lectins, we can be very helpful. There's been some research that some of this complement is involved in most autoimmune disease, but even things like osteoporosis, they're finding that Romania can be helpful for. And it's interesting because osteoporosis sometimes is worse when a woman goes through menopause, and Romania helps balance hormones too, as just a side effect, because if you look at the structure of the active ingredient of the Romania, it looks just like hormones. So
I know, and you point that out. So,
yeah.
Dr. Z, that is something to know. Let's go on to another one of these herbs because we have about 15 minutes left to our show today, and you have so much research here. Now, cordyceps is just phenomenal. You're calling it a mushroom. I guess it's a mushroom, but it's kind of like a fungus rather than a mushroom, isn't it? Or is it classified as a mushroom?
Well, yeah, it is. We use the mycelial part. It is considered in the mushroom family, but it's a weird mushroom in that it actually is one of these things that has been shown to, in the old days, parasitize caterpillars and things like that, and actually kill them and then grow inside their body. So it's kind of eerie, like the movie Aliens type of thing. But they don't use those anymore. When we go to Chinatown, we see big jars of cordyceps mushrooms and the worms and the caterpillars. We're not giving that to people, so people are like get all creeped out with that. Now they're able to grow the mycelia, which is not the fruiting part of the mushroom, but the kind of the underground rooty part. That's the part where they get the medicine, and then they extract the medicine from the cordyceps, which there's a lot of herbs in there.
I believe it's grown on a vegan medium for those who did not like using cordyceps because of the connection to a worm or an animal part. Right, it is vegan, and it's on barley malt or something like that. That is completely vegetarian.
Excellent point. Yeah, because that creeps people out. But they've discovered the main active ingredient is called cordycepin. And if you look at this molecule, and I have a picture of it in the PowerPoint, and you compare it to the molecule ATP, which is like human fuel, that's what fuels people to do that works in their mitochondria that helps them with energy and repair and the immune system and all these different functions. They're almost identical. And it's interesting, the modern-day resurgence of the interest in cordyceps started in 1993 when the Chinese national games, the Chinese national team broke 9 world records in the 1,500-meter, 3,000-meter, and 10,000-meter. And when they asked why, the coach said, because my athletes were taking cordyceps, and it wasn't a banned substance by the Olympic Committee at that time. I don't really know if it's banned now, quite honestly, but nonetheless, they were like, wow. So this is where they started taking a evaluation of this ancient medicine, because it's been around for a really long time. It was considered very used by emperors and wealthy royal families. It was very scarce back then, so it was treasured as highly as gold, reserved for the rich and powerful. But so what are some modern applications of this? Well, one thing about cordyceps that the researchers show is that this is one of those interesting substances that imposes a bidirectional modulation over the immune system. What we say in Chinese, a yin and yang like balance. You know the yin and yang sign, Dr. Kamai? That kind of one balances the other. We need that when it comes to autoimmune disease and other things like allergies and asthma. We need to be balanced in yin and yang, and this is where cordyceps has its great effect. Some modern research shows that it indeed has powerful effects. And actually, the allopathic drug, a big allopathic drug came from cordyceps that's used to stop transplantation rejection. And so this drug is very powerful, and possibly that's one reason why cordyceps works. Possibly, it's called cyclosporin, that drug. People have heard of it. It's like one of the older drugs that's been kind of abandoned for these newer biologics.
Yeah,
but
cordyceps is amazing. It also has anti-cancer effects as well as anti-inflammatory, and in and of itself has antioxidant properties that most people have heard of. Right,
so it's kind of interesting. How could it, if cancer is like, where you need your immune system to fight, but autoimmune disease where you need to chill out the immune system, how can the herbs do both things? Well, Cordyceps does that, and that's why we call it an amphoteric, something that balances the body. So, yeah, I really like that. And the recent study showed that you need about 3 grams per day. This was done on older patients with exercise fatigue, like they just didn't have a lot of energy as they hit 65 or so. And they gave cordyceps for 12 weeks, about 3 grams, and they felt great. So I think it's one of those herbs that
underused.
That's underused, and it's in the T-cell balance that I hope folks learn
That's
about.
a good way to get it. Like in T-cell balance, they have the best kind, that vegetarian form. It's well tested, and a really easy way to go ahead and incorporate cordyceps into your program. So we do not want to leave today's show without talking about something that probably is the summertime when we're doing our show today. Almost everyone has in their backyard or have heard of, and that is rosemary. One of the really interesting things I think about rosemary is that rosemary has been used for so many years in a sort of a folkloric way to improve memory. And now we have some really great studies showing that in addition to its great effect on helping to balance the autoimmune response, it also does improve memory.
Yeah. I don't really know how it actually does that, but probably it could act as an antioxidant. I know it's a good circulatory tonic as well, rosmarinic acid. Rosmarinic acid is actually what they call a polyphenol. We've heard about polyphenols as antioxidants, and they're found in green tea and dark chocolate and things like that. But they're also found in rosemary, and rosmarinic acid can both kill the activated T cells these are the T cells that are already been programmed to destroy the body. See, sometimes with autoimmune disease, you have the naive T cells. The T cells start as naive, and they need a job. So they're trained and recruited by the body to either become sort of military, folks to seek and destroy, or peacemakers. So depending upon how you were indoctrinated and recruited is your job. And it turns out that sometimes, even if you clean up the diet and do all these great naturopathic things, there are still some of these, let's call them jihadists for lack of a better word, that get indoctrinated, and they go on to try to indoctrinate the young, naive T cells in the future. Well, rosemary has the ability to take out these T cells that are pretty much indoctrinated without affecting the naive T cells, and thus you start over from scratch. So your immune system can learn to not destroy the body. And I just want to end with this really interesting clinical study that this Canadian doctor, and I stumbled upon this just in reading the NDNR magazine, Naturopathic Doctor News, and it was this Canadian doctor who found that her patient had Hashimoto's, right, on an exam, and she didn't really know how to treat Hashimoto's, which is a type of disease where you destroy your thyroid gland. That's the target organ for the autoimmune disease. But she also just had concomitantly a lot of allergies. And she knew that rosmarinic acid and the T-cell balance could help with allergies because T cells are involved in allergies. So she started giving her the T-cell balance formula, and then what she noticed is that on further blood work, she saw less and less of an attack on the lady's thyroid gland and she looked at her for 3 years, a case study for 3 years, until she totally brought the thyroid gland back into balance and totally fixed it. Now, we're not saying that these herbs can fix everyone's with Hashimoto's, but who knows? It's a really good case study, and I followed her and contacted her and asked if I could use her case in today's radio show and other presentations. But rosmarinic acid showed, in combination with the cordyceps and the rhamania that we talked about today, showed the best efficacy for treating both allergies and, of course, the Hashimoto's disease. So that was really interesting.
Well, that is very interesting. In fact, the whole entire thing is because there are options. That's what's so important. And of course, when we're talking about, let's say, a kind of combination such as T-cell balance, which does have many of these things in it, the rhamania and the cordyceps and the rosemary, we are never indicating that to actually deal with some kind of severe issue that you can just pop a pill. That is not how natural medicine works. It's a comprehensive change of what's causing it, like change the diet, change the exercise, deal with stress and recognize it, get rid of mold in your house. I mean, it's it's a wide base, not a one-pill solution.
Right, and there's so many other plants, too, that have been used for eternity, skullcap and licorice root and astragalus and curcuma, of course, is a superstar herb, but, those are subjects, I guess, for another show. We could continue to talk about them. Herbs never cease to amaze me. When you look at the research on curcuma and you pit it against 10 of the top medications, curcuma acts just like many of these medications. To me, that's fascinating. You know what? It just proves this is why this herbal knowledge has lasted so long. If herbs were fake, flash in the pan, fake news, or whatever you want to call it, they would have died out a long time ago, the information. But this information was so revered and so watched by our ancestral doctors that this knowledge is passed on from generation to generation. They wouldn't bother passing on things that have no basis, even though they didn't have the science that we have now to look at these things molecularly. They saw that these things worked, and I think that's a huge and important fact.
It so much is, Dr. Z. And it was just wonderful sharing the airwaves with you today. It was great. We gave out so much good information. And if you thought this was good information, you can share with your friends and family by telling them to listen to the archives anytime. And thank you all so much for visiting naturalnurse.com, drznaturally.com, emailing us and participating both on ground and online in all the educational opportunities that we offer through Natural Alternatives, as well as our wide range of books and information and free podcasts and all the things we have been doing for literally 40 years right here. And thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Z.
Great. And telling everyone to stay healthy.
Stay healthy.
Bye.
Bye.